Hey guys, welcome to HipHughes History. We're going to chop up the election of 1808 as we see Thomas Jefferson walk away from the White House and one James Madison ready to fill those big shoes. So let's take a look at the candidates, we'll take a look at the issues, we'll take a look at the electoral map, and then we'll see if we can't giddy up for some learning. So let's get her done right now. So the Democratic Republicans are going to really have a favorite son in James Madison. Again, continuing this Virginia dynasty idea. Washington was from Virginia. We had Thomas Jefferson from Virginia. And here's James Madison, who is Thomas Jefferson's Secretary of State. And James Madison is a little bit of a weird cat. You have to remember that he is one of the authors of the Federalist Paper. He is kind of a right-hand man with George Washington. He's sort of like a Federalist, but he has a falling out with the Federalist Party during the John Adams administration in how he reacts to the Alien Sedition Acts and really sides with Jefferson and kind of pulls Jefferson off the ledge. Jefferson is talking about secession when it comes to the Alien Sedition Acts, eventually settling in on nullification with James Madison trying to pull him to the center. By 1800, he is a Democratic Republican. He takes up arms with Thomas Jefferson as his Secretary of State, and Thomas Jefferson sees him as his logical successor. And bravo for Thomas Jefferson. We always give props to George Washington for setting down the two-term rule. It ain't a precedent until somebody else does it. So Thomas Jefferson walking away after 2 terms is really going to cement that rule down. But there is some dissension in the Democratic Republican ranks. We have the Embargo Act of 1807, which has shut down all trade with Europe. All trade with Europe. We have Napoleonic Wars going on in Europe. The British are beginning to impress American soldiers. We're seeing the roots of the War of 1812 kind of being laid down. And Jefferson's reaction as kind of an isolationist is put up the walls, let's have an embargo. And that embargo is really going to hurt the bottom line for not only people that are trading in the Northeast, but farmers out west who are seeking to export their grains. So the competition comes from one, James Monroe. That's right, guys, the Monroe Doctrine. He is the former ambassador to Great Britain. He's also from Virginia, and there is some support from him, not only from kind of this Embargo Act standpoint, but from people who see James Madison as being too strong of a Federalist for the Democratic Republicans. Remember, this is the guy, under Jefferson who organized the Louisiana Purchase and the Compact of 1802, where the federal government is gobbling up areas of Georgia which are going to become Mississippi and Alabama. But there are Southerners in the tradition of the Democratic Republicans that don't like this idea of a big government, so James Monroe is their guy. And George Clinton, not the funkadelic musician, but the former governor of New York who has been the vice president with Thomas Jefferson, also saw support in the North, especially from kind of those trade people that we talked about, really against this Embargo Act. But at the end of the day, it's going to be enough that Thomas Jefferson blesses James Madison. He's going to be on the head of the ticket, and he's going to stick with George Clinton. And other than James Calhoun in 1824, he's the only sitting vice president to transfer into the vice presidency role of another presidency. But they actually do remain on the ballot. Monroe remained on the ballot, and George Clinton remained on the ballot, chalking up something like 6 electoral votes out of his former state of New York. But on the Federalists, they're going to go for the same ticket that they had before. They're not even going to think about it. They're like, we want Charles Pinckney, we want Rufus King. Charles Pinckney, the former general from the American Revolutionary War, he's a Southern Federalist, which is kind of unique from the state of South Carolina. So he's going to get the support of the Federalist Party, along with the former senator from New York, Rufus King, who has close ties with England, and they thought that was, again, another powerful combination. And even though they got really, really blown out in 1804, they think they have the magic dust to settle in 1808, but they don't, of course. So let's take a look at the results of the 1808 election. So we want to set down context first again. Really what's going on in the nation is really the precursor to the War of 1812. Again, as those Napoleonic Wars are kind of battling out between Great Britain and France and Europe, it's sucking in the Americans. We're getting impressed. British soldiers are taking our merchants. So Thomas Jefferson's going to lay down that Embargo Act, no trade. And that's really not going to have effect on Europe, but it is having an effect on the American economy. So that's one thing that was going on in in favor of the Federalists, but the Federalists just don't have any core support out of the Northeast. So at the end of the day, it's going to be another huge blowout. Not as bad as 1804, but pretty darn bad. In terms of popular vote, it's 65% for the Democratic Republicans and Madison, 33% for the Federalists. The Federalists are only going to take 5 states. Now, they only took 2 states in the last election, so they're going to pick up not only Connecticut and Delaware this time, but New Hampshire. They're going to pick up Massachusetts, and they're going to pick up Rhode Island. And of course, these are all hardcore northeastern states. It's the last remnants of the Federalist Party. At the end of the day, 12 states for the Democratic Republicans, but all that counts is that electoral college. So we're going to go with 122 electoral votes for James Madison, the next president of the United States of America, and only 47 votes for poor General Charles Pinckney. But at the end of the day, this is an election which is really showing us the demise of the Federalist Party and really showing the roots of the War of 1812. And I think it's interesting to see James Madison, how he evolves again from kind of a Federalist to a Democratic Republican. He's opposing during this election the National Bank. He wants to continue kind of these Jeffersonian Democratic Republican ideas. But once he gets in there, he's really going to become more of a stronger Federalist, actually supporting the National Bank and supporting a very strong national defense, investing in the military. But at the end of the day, it is, like we said, an electoral blowout. So there you go, guys. We hope that you understand something about the 1808 election as we play the cards of all the presidential elections. Check out the election playlist down below. I think this is number 38. We're going to get there one day. And if you haven't checked out HipHughes history, we have over 350 social studies laced videos, teaching videos, current event videos. It's a little bit cray-cray. All right, guys, always remember where attention goes, energy flows. Giddy up for the learning. We'll see you guys next time. Did you press my buttons?